No worries. If I could just get a thumbs up, people can see this, that would be awesome.
Yes, we
Okay,
can.
cool. Firstly, welcome to the first community meeting for 2024. My name is Warwick Mitchell. I am the chair of MANRS Steering Committee. Today we have a number of different people that are going to be talking. We have Alejandro from the GCA, so from plus we have Andre, who's going to be talking about some updates for MANRS. We also have Olaf, who's going to be talking from ISOC, as well as Ryan. Jeff is going to be speaking about ROV trends and incident trends going forward. And obviously, we're then going to hold a little bit of a community conversation at the end and just have a bit of a discussion about what we've heard today. And then we'll wrap up and go from there. There will be a follow-on session of this tomorrow. Well, in approximately 12 hours from now's time. So for those of you who will be joining again, and we'll get underway. But with that, I'm going to hand over to Alejandro to introduce the GCA, and we will start from there. Alejandro?
Yes, thank you. I'm gonna share my screen now. Thanks everybody for joining. You can join again in 12 hours, so that's if you really love this, we're gonna be there. So I don't know, you can see my screen, yeah, I guess.
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I was in the wrong. Oh my God, what did I do there? I was just okay. Meet the GCA. So we thought it was interesting because this is the first time that we do this in the secretariat, and we thought it was interesting to give you a little introduction of the GCA so that you understand who we are and what we do and why we are so happy to support MANRS, yeah, the initiative. So won't take long. Please interrupt me with questions. The slides, I can share them afterwards. I have some links for you to explore. So the idea is that you can later you can simply play with them and go deeper into the links. Yeah. So I will go through everything in a very quick way. Yeah. So what is the GCA? The GCA is a non-profit. Our mission is to enable a secure and trustworthy internet. Yeah. So we work against systemic cyber risk and against the components of systemic cyber risk. And we do it with a very action-oriented approach. This is why the do something, measure it. Yeah. We build programs, partnerships, tools, solutions. We put people together. We create communities with the idea of making the internet a safer place, yeah, and a trustworthy place. So how do we do this? We have a triple approach. There you are. So we focus on three big blocks. One of them is remember, systemic cyber risk, yeah. So we address it at the top of the supply chain, at the infrastructures of the internet. That's the Internet Integrity Program where we belong. Here we have a project on IoT security and unwanted traffic, that is 8. We also have another project, which is domain trust, which is against domain abuse. And we also have MANRS right now, and the open source new project. It's brand new. This is just beginning. We're defining it. The idea in all of them is to create a community of actors that can have influence. Basically, what MANRS does. I'll show you later that MANRS was our actual inspiration to build this. Yeah. So we address big issues of the internet, and we put people that can have an influence on them, put them to work together. We try to mobilize those actors in order to improve the impact or to mitigate the impact of those risks, big risks that affect everybody. So this is once agreements come together, when best practices start happening, everybody benefits. Yeah. And even if without them noticing, yeah, that's the idea, to benefit the whole system. Yeah. The other one is capacity and resilience. To the right here, what we do, we focus on the end users, and we enable them. We give them, empower them. We give them tools to protect themselves. We use this by using the CIS control model as a reference. We do it we translate that technical language into something that people can understand, and we compile tools from different partners in order to protect them with a logic, yeah? And we give the power to the end users so that they can protect themselves. So in this case, we are addressing systemic cyber risk from the perspective of the end user. We have a number of cybersecurity toolkits for small businesses, for journalists, for mission-based organizations and different types of portals and options. Yeah, so that basically with every community we agree on what needs to be there in their toolkit, and we work together with them. All our action is done through the partners. Yeah, so we cannot do this. We are a small organization after all. It's about 30 people in 3 continents. No, in 2 continents, sorry. And we are basically small, and we need help from the partners. And if we can achieve this, is thanks to the partners. So it's a partnership organization. Yeah, we have partners that support us in the not only financially, because they give the money that we need to keep it running, but also with tools and with initiatives and getting us together. This partnership and collaborative approach is the 3rd pillar of our activity, which is the collaborative cybersecurity. So the Global Cyber Alliance, we define ourselves as a neutral convener. Yeah, we are a meeting point. We are a place where other nonprofits and with other organizations can have conversations in a trusted environment. And in that sense, we have used our capacity to bring people together to create initiatives that go beyond our own work. Yeah, we never compete with our partners. It's a non-competitive environment, so we foster collaboration. This is why we do things like Nonprofit Cyber. Nonprofit Cyber is an alliance of about 35 nonprofits working on cybersecurity from different aspects. I think you're familiar with Anti-Phishing Working Group, probably with FIRST, with OWASP, Cyber Peace Institute, Cyber Readiness Institute. They are our partners, and we all work together in the nonprofit cyber initiative. Yeah, we share resources. We have a mission where we work together for different aspects of cybersecurity. Then we also have the Cyber Civil Defense Initiative that was started by Greg Newmark. There we are trying to develop and to create open source tool for the end users, and also to put together open source initiatives that can have an impact for end users. Yeah, this one has a very US centered focus, but we are also trying to make it more global. Yeah, to bring other players from other parts of the world. Actually, we did a meeting in Brussels 1.5 years ago. And then we also have Common Good Cyber, which in this case, the idea, there's a message in the chat. Yeah, GFC, of course, Olaf. You're right. GFC too, yeah, GFC is the capacity building, yeah, #1 actor in capacity building, and we are also partnering with them in nonprofit cyber. And Common Good Cyber also, there is GFC, and the idea there is to not to compete against each other for the resources. All nonprofits, we have very limited resources, and we have big missions, yeah. So sometimes we struggle to get the funds we need and to get the support we need from our partners. So what we are creating there is the understanding that our work is a common good, something that needs to be supported on a global scale, and we are trying to create like some sort of shared resources, a shared fund, something that would help us at once all together, yeah, without competing for the resources. And that's a very interesting project. It just started. We kicked it off in February in Washington DC, and it's working very well. So I have big support. So hopefully in 1 year time I can give you some updates there. You have links if you want to share. You have the slides later. You can play with them. So internet integrity is the names, numbers, and roots. That's how we focus our work. You know, the internet is built through names, domain names, through numbers, IPs, and through roots. That's the routing security and the routing systems. Yeah, this is the objective of our internet integrity program, what we are trying to do. So again, we are working collaboration, because the internet is a complex system. There's lots of interdependencies, and nobody can fix it on one single side. Yeah, you need collaboration. Yeah. So what we do is it's a process that has 2 steps. It's very simple. First, we identify existing efforts. We identify existing initiatives and existing issues, and we try to bring the relevant actors together and get the broadest possible industry uptake. So we identify an issue and we try to create a community that can address that issue, but by itself, yeah, by the community itself, knowing the issue by themselves and working together to address the issue. If you see MANRS, this is what MANRS was the inspiration for everything we did, yeah. So you know Leslie Daigle, I guess, 10 years ago. Well, she was there when MANRS was started, and she took the idea and the inspiration of this to build the entire program and our work. And this is why MANRS has been an inspiration. And now that we took over the secretariat is great news, yeah, because for us it's the inspiration materializing and being a much stronger guide for our partners and for the rest of our work, yeah. So this is why it's so important for us. This is the way we work. This is the process we use. First, we identify and we create agreement, and second, we rally community action, yeah. These are the three big projects that we have at this moment in the Internet Integrity program. So you can see MANRS is a mature project. It's already working. It's been working for 10 years. So we are just trying to take it to the next level, yeah, to make it grow and to make sure that the uptake of the actions involved in MANRS are increases and it becomes even bigger and more global. So that's a mature model, and we want to take it to new directions and to new. That's something we have to speak with as a community. But well, my colleague Andrew will cover that part. Yeah. So we are doing more. We're trying to make MANRS grow. Yeah, make it more relevant. But that is already working, and it's the community. It's the network operators. You are working there. You are a community, and it runs by itself. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Then we also have two more projects. One is domain trust, which is on domain abuse. There we are a bit more advanced. We have identified the issues. We have a very strong community of people that go beyond the traditional scope of domain abuse. So we go beyond registers and registrars. We have other participants like financial institutions, law enforcement agencies, national search. We have cybersecurity firms. So in this case, what we are doing, we are at the stage of identification and agreement. We are working on two directions. We are working on the identification of best practices that we can collect and curate and present to the community as an agreed way, And we're also working in the identification of data. What kind of data should be shared for this to be meaningful and to have an impact? And the other project we have is the AID project, which is initially it was an IoT security project. It's basically an globally distributed network of IoT sensors, honeypots basically. And we've been running this for 5 years. No, almost 6 years now. And we have so much information from different parts of the world. It's a massive volume of information. And in this case, we have realized that it goes beyond IoT security and it gives a lot of information about network operations, about network security, yeah. All the unwanted traffic issues that are happening around the globe. Yeah, we have 200 sensors, they're collecting information and we have terabytes of data telling us that there is something bad there running all the time, regardless of the device. Yeah. So in this case, what we are a very, very early stage with the identification stage. We are offering that data to researchers. So if anybody is interested in unwanted traffic, just contact us. We are offering it. We have a cohort system. We take up to 6 research projects every year. And what we're trying to do there is we're trying to see what this data is telling us and how we can convert it into an agreement, yeah, with the next step, yeah, how to turn that into something that is meaningful to an industry, yeah. So at this moment, it's very early. We had our first research project was done by the Max Planck Institute. It was wonderful, and we saw a lot of interesting things. It's public, so if you want details on that, I can share them with you. And soon we will be publishing the next research projects from other researchers, yeah. So that's the way it goes. MANRS is mature, domain trust is becoming mature, and AID is the very beginning, yeah, but there we are. Okay, so this is more or less what I was saying. You have domain trust that focuses on the names aspect, yeah. AID focuses on the numbers, and MANRS focuses on the roots. These names, numbers, and roots, it's a way for us to cover these issues for non-technical audiences.
I think Alejandro's internet has just stopped. We'll just bear with it one moment. I can see he's frozen. So pretend that I'm doing a singing and dancing conversation while we're just waiting for him to reconnect, because I know he is in a hotel. So just bear with us for a moment, and hopefully he will be back shortly. And then we'll continue on. Andre, if you are about, we may get you to go next and then bring Pablo back, sorry, Alejandro back in when he's back online.
Sure, sure. Hi, Warwick. Hi,
Uh,
everyone. Yeah, we can do that.
We'll just give him a minute. We'll just give him another 30 seconds,
Yeah,
and then if he come back.
yeah. Okay.
But I just want to give you a heads up
Give
in
me a
case
go ahead, and I'll start sharing my slide.
no worries.
My worry is that we end at the same hotel.
Yeah. Well, let's get underway, and we'll come back to him when he comes back online. So we'll just jump ahead in the actual order of events today, and Andre is just going to give an update on MANRS and the secretariat.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Just to make sure that you see my screen, or rather the presentation slide.
We can
Cool.
see it.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Andrei Erbachevsky. I'm Technical Director at the Global Cyber Alliance, part of MANRS Secretariat. And this is a short update on MANRS activities and MANRS growth for this year, and basically since our last meeting in November 2023. Well, I'd like to start with a statement that we have transitioned MANRS to the new Secretariat. That process is complete. Formally, I think the cutover date was 30th of December, 1st of January. Some of activities were sort of, overflowing from last year to this year. I think we fully completed. All assets are under control of GCA. MANRS is fully settled. The auditing process is in place, performed by GCA. We are operating MANRS Observatory, mailing list, and so forth. So I think that's a positive message that I hope you haven't experienced destructions, or many destructions. At least there were some hiccups that we solved on the way, but I think in general the operation of MANRS have been uninterrupted. Internet Society, that transition is done under the collaboration agreement between the Internet Society and the Global Cyber Alliance. And while GCA running the secretariat and operations of the effort, the Internet Society continues to provide financial support, training, and advocacy. What is very important is that the vision and the spirit of the initiative remains the same. It's the community effort, and our focus right now, the main, is continuity in the short to mid-term. And therefore, all community activities, well, that meeting is probably one of the manifestations of this, including the steering committee and working groups and all other stuff that we are doing in MANRS, are not affected. Right, so I mentioned MANRS community. Well, and probably you know because you're part of MANRS community, but let's look at some numbers. We see steady growth of the MANRS community since our last meeting. More than 40 members have joined. Oh, interesting. Okay, that's a global spread of the MANRS community. You see there are big blobs in the United States of America and Brazil. Brazil, for instance, that's part of our collaboration effort with NICBR. They went and promoted MANRS in their community, and that's the way MANRS can scale, right? All of you are ambassadors of MANRS and working with your clients. At least that's the spirit, and some of you doing better and some of you doing slightly less, but that's how the MANRS community grows. Well, this is the demographics, and we see that since last meeting, we have growth in RIPE region, followed by ARIAN and other regions in the world. Well, I don't need to really introduce the steering committee, but because it's a very important part of the MANRS community, I put the slide together. I don't need to introduce them because you elected these people. Warwick is now chairing this community meeting as well. And I know that a few steering committee members are also joining this community meeting. Let me talk a little bit about MANRS readiness, because MANRS is not just self-declared compliance. We have continuous monitoring of MANRS readiness or MANRS conformance to MANRS actions, and that makes this effort, I think, distinct from some other initiatives or best practices that we see in the internet. I think, well, this is the chart from the observatory. All of you can look at this. This is actually publicly available. Those are average numbers of MANRS readiness. And as you can see, we are doing not bad. For sure, we're doing better than the rest of the world on average. Just to remind you what those numbers mean, those are average MANRS readiness scores for all 4 actions. Well, 4 actions, there are 5 circles, of course, because routing information is split into 2, IRR and RPKI. And if you hover over the sort of this donut specific color, you will see the percentage of autonomous systems that are ready, that are aspiring or lagging. And for instance, if you look at RPKI adoption, you can see that over 67% of MANRS autonomous systems are fully ready, meaning they're almost 100% registered in RPKI, and about 22% of them have no RPKI registration, or very little, at least. So to compare this with the global thing, and I think that should make us proud, that's the averages globally. So MANRS, I think that's one of the indication of effective MANRS. So some numbers, and I think the overall statement is that MANRS conformance is improving. We have more than 1,200 autonomous systems registered with the MANRS participants. And if we look at the global metrics, then we can see that route filtering is 0% non-conformant, meaning there were no real incidents for the MANRS participants detected. In the brackets, you can see the numbers from November 2023. Coordination is improving, global validation is improving, and we are improving in the area of global validation RPKI, meaning that more and more ROAs are registered covering address space announced by MANRS participants. As you know, we have in the observatory a feedback feature, meaning that you can review the incidents that were reported for your autonomous systems, and you can provide feedback if you think this is false positives. And we know that because of the nature of the measurement system, where we inferring intent, there might be false positives. That feature is very important because we are still preparing for publishing scores for Action 1. We don't want to publish scores that are not sort of fully of high quality, where we can say, yeah, there are no false positives, so basically none. So this is part of the future appeal process, which will allow you to review the incidents and report something that is not looking good from your perspective. I have to say, well, you see the numbers, and they're about 60, which means that they're less than 10%, well, fluctuating, less than 10% of participants actually using this feature, well, less than 10% experienced incidents, but even less so, and that's the blue spot, only a few percent are actually using this feature and reporting on this incident. So I really encourage you to look and regularly log in into the observatory, look up at the incidents that were reported. All of you should be getting monthly reports. If not, contact the secretariat, which says if you have incidents, and if you see you had incidents, then please log in into the observatory and provide this feedback. This feedback is also important because we're working with our data providers, and this data allows them to improve the heuristics and improve the quality of the data. Well, I started talking about MANRS Observatory. Let me continue. The main change in the MANRS Observatory that you might have seen is that we integrated fully the raw statistics, which is called ROST, and it's not only facelift, it added some new features. Well, first of all, it's of course the same style as the MANRS Observatory, so it's sort of the same continuum if you work with the observatory, but also it now shows some maybe operationally important information. For instance, if you see that there are some ROAs that are not that invalidate some of the announcements, then you can click and you can see what are ROAs exactly and where the problem is. And you can do multiple searches by country, by a particular network, things like that. And we continue working on this to fully integrate with the observatory. So for instance, you can apply the same filters, the same favorites, and it's really a continuum sort of space. You probably also know that many of the observatory data is available through an API. These same access permissions apply. For instance, the public non-MANRS members have limited access to data. For instance, they don't have access to details about particular networks. They can only access data based on region, country. But you as MANRS participants, you basically have all access to MANRS readiness scores, to network information, and so on and so forth. So that allows you maybe to automate some of the stuff, for instance, on reporting incidents, and you can integrate this in your business processes. We're still keeping legacy endpoints because some of our partners, such as IXP Manager and IXPDB, are using those APIs, but we're working with the partners to phase this out and move them to new endpoints. Let me talk a bit about engagement and outreach. We continue this effort. There are not many changes. MANRS newsletter, I think recently you should have received MANRS newsletter. MANRS blog invited guests. We have, compared to Internet Society, we have more limited capacity on sort of in-depth analysis of routing incidents and this type of posting, but we're working with invited guests and really appreciate their contribution to MANRS blog. We also looking and re-engaging with MANRS partners. Many of them, they had specific arrangements with the Internet Society, which in many cases was beyond just MANRS on other aspects. So we are re-engaging with the partners. We are looking for new partners, building this support group, which is very important, that can support in many different ways, starting from sort of data supply, technical support, training, community building, and of course, financial support for this initiative. We again participate in events. We try to participate in some of the key events in all area regions for general awareness of MANRS and engage with MANRS community members, with MANRS partners. But we cannot be anywhere, everywhere. So we also thinking of the concept, how they can scale up, how can we raise awareness of MANRS in different regions at different NOGs without necessarily going there, physically present there. So working through our partners and maybe enthusiastic MANRS community members that can help. And of course, you can count on our information support in those matters, such as presentation slides and data, this sort of things. Now, MANRS is evolving, and that's very important for this effort because the efforts that are not evolving, they usually die. So one of the examples is an initiative that called MANRS Plus. We start a working group last year, which is focusing on provider-customer relationship, and especially looking for industries, not telecom industries, sort of, setting the context for routing security as supply chain security. So really what we call here enterprise customers is not necessarily banks. It might be universities. We just say it's a stub network usually that is looking for connectivity provider. And that connectivity provider can be a very critical part of their supply security, leading them to secure and robust access to their external digital assets. That is more and more so, right? More and more assets become external to an organization. And we did some analysis, and what's interesting is that while MANRS is working on the sort of securing the global internet, and the internet is big for enterprises, and in this particular use case, the internet is quite small. It's maybe one provider, maximum two providers that are intermediaries, sort of supporting their data flow from them to their partners or from them to their digital assets. So selection of a connectivity provider is very important. And MANRS Plus trying to achieve two goals. First is to align the requirements better that are not only good for the global routing security, but also valued by enterprises, and make those requirements maybe somewhat stronger compared to base MANRS. And also achieve high level of assurance and conformance. I think MANRS already made good steps in sort of transparency of conformance of MANRS participants, but MANRS measurement system is mostly based on passive ways that allows us to calculate MANRS readiness scores for almost all autonomous systems operating on the internet without requiring cooperation from their side. But I think that also the downside is that sometimes either we don't see something, or we see something that is not completely true. So I'm talking about false negatives and false positives. So in MANRS Plus, we are trying to achieve a high level of assurance. So if MANRS Plus declares conformance of particular to particular requirement, then it's almost 100% guaranteed. And MANRS Plus, I think, besides sort of focusing on that and maybe bring more value to participants, I think this work can also enhance and provide insights for the base MANRS, triggering some review of existing MANRS actions and ways to improve the base MANRS. Well, I mentioned the measurements and the passive measurements we have. Well, the only active measurement we have currently is the anti-spoofing, which requires MANRS participants run spoofer test. And well, you know that there are not enough data because not everyone is participating in those active measurements. But for MANRS Plus, I think we expect higher level of cooperation, and we can think of things, how can we more actively, for instance, measure conformance with routing security controls, right? For instance, conducting experiments with MANRS participants on injecting, alternating valid and invalid routes and see how they propagate, things like this. And the current state is that we finished work last year by publishing the control metrics. It's available on the website. So if you go to the MANRS Plus working group space, you can find it there. And for this year, the working group is focusing on three main areas: the detailed audit requirements, what is really required, and what an auditor, which we hope that most of it would be automated, can check to assure compliance. Extended measurement framework, I showed you some of the ideas, and we're working more. And if you're interested, very much appreciate if we can sort of set up some of the test beds and test some of those ideas, and extending the measurement infrastructure in general. Meeting monthly on Zoom. There is a mailing list, and if you're interested, please contact us. I will be happy to join you. And let me finish this update with the slide that you probably saw that we frequently use in our presentations, why people join and support MANRS. And you already joined MANRS, so I don't need to sell this to you, but I think the question here, is it still relevant? Does MANRS stand to this promise? Does MANRS lead to improving your own security position? do you think it's still the expectation of operators community to be MANRS conformant? Does it bring this benefits sort of in this kind of social context? And is it a competitive differentiator? So we'd like to hear from you, share your thoughts. Maybe you can share this. I think we have a community forum Q&A. Please, that feedback is very important. Or just reach out to us, to Secretariat, and share your thoughts. With this, that's the end of my presentation. Let me stop sharing, and thank you very much. Warwick, I think you are muted.
Sorry, is that working now? Okay, sorry. Are there any questions for Andre that anyone wants to ask now? Otherwise, we can hold them for the community conversation at the end. I'm going to go with that. We'll hold it till the end. Thank you for that, Andre. And Alejandro, let's go back to about slides 5 or 6 and continue on from where you were.
Apologies. Yeah, it's something happened with my connection, and I don't know. I kept on talking and talking, and then I saw that you were all frozen. So, well, I think that those things happen. I was almost ready. I don't want to take much of the time, and I don't know if anybody has any question now at this point.
Well, I think
Okay.
we can continue on.
Yeah. So just briefly, I was saying that I covered the projects we have, and I focus on these names, numbers, and roots, which is the way we are translating this into a non-technical language. Yeah. This is the way we want to go beyond the communities and to make society and the people understand that what we're doing has a meaning. Yeah, we are protecting the infrastructure of the internet. We're trying to do that, and that's very important because we want to have broad support, yeah, for what we do, and we need to get some visibility that goes beyond the affected communities. Yeah, it's a difficult task because we're building new narratives and new ways of describing our work. So any support, any help, any advice, because I know that many of you have been also trying to, I guess, you also have to tell what you're doing. Yeah, so any help is appreciated. Yeah? But the idea is to focus on these 3 concepts and to make them more relevant for other areas of the society. Yeah. So as I said, MANRS is the blueprint for success. This is what we use as an inspiration for the program. This is the communities that we are talking about. We know this. We have the 4 programs inside MANRS. We have the GCA extended community because some of the MANRS participants and MANRS partners were already partners of the GCA. So we are trying to see how to get them involved into the triple vision of name, names, roots. We're having some conversations with some of them. Basically, this is as you can see, we focus first on the community. Community is the foundation, as Andre put it once, and I like that concept. We start from the community and then we move forward to the action. Yeah. This is the blueprint. This is the model we use. That's the methodology that we use to concrete, to make that action effective. Yeah. So we have industry actors, and agreed behavior, resources, social engineering, dashboard. Yeah. And if you translate it into MANRS, you see that the industry actors is the 4 programs: network operators, CDN and cloud providers, IXPs, within vendors. The resources, we have resources for the internet society, training and tools. The dashboard, how to make the data that is being shared, how to make in every project we have different types of data, but the idea is to use data as an opportunity to speak and to understand what is going on and how the solution of the problem is advancing. Here's the observatory, of course. The agreed behavior in this case is the mutually agreed norm for routing security. So that's what the industry agreed to do. And that's what is guiding. Yeah, we have the observatory to measure the compliance and the uptake of those agreed behaviors. And then the social engineering, yeah, it's how we do this social, how we turn it into something that grows and has a wider impact. Yeah, by MANRS champions, the partners, the communications events, all that. Yeah, this is the model. This is basically our objectives for this first year. As a secretariat, it's very conservative. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We know MANRS is a mature project. It grows, it works well, and as you saw from Andre's presentation, it has a very good momentum. So basically, this is what we want to do. Yeah, well, we are now almost the half of the year, and we are doing everything that is here. Yeah, we did the transition, which is the achieving greater heights for MANRS. That was like the opening, yeah, this post where we describe why this agreement happened and what were the plans. We went through a transition period where we got introduced to the steering committee, we got their support, and we were coordinating our efforts, also transferring all the assets and all that. And then January 1st, we started working. Yeah, we are in the middle of, especially our focus is on the objective number one. That's what I was saying before, and Andre covered it too. It's to meet the community, to meet the broad community of participants, but also those who are called partners. Yeah, those who are supporting the initiative. Yeah, and trying to redefine those relationships and to maybe take them to a different level. Yeah, because many of them, they were inherited with into the society. So we are trying to understand how this relates in the new environment, and also to get new partners. So if anybody is wishing to get more involved in MANRS, apart from being a participant, but if you wish to contribute with outreach, with different in the slides from Andre, it was described, outreach, communication, resources, any help is appreciated. Yeah, so if you want to go one step further, please let us know. And of course, fostering the implementation of actions is that take that the measurements that were being shown from the observatory, and also adding new participants. Yeah, we've moved. It's growing, so it's good news. So very briefly, this is Domain Trust. This is a project on domain abuse. This is the community that we're talking about in this case. It's different, of course. We have registries, registrars, network operators, financial institutions, anti-fraud platforms, national search, cybersecurity experts, cyber analytics, and this kind of people that explore the data and try to mitigate issues. And this is what we're doing with Domain Trust. It's been running for almost 4 years now. It has during this time it's not a data feed. It's very important to know that Domain Trust is we have a data platform, but the idea of it is to share the data you want the others to see. So it's a community. They know each other. They know whenever somebody shares some data, usually on suspicious domains, not on confirmed abuse, but on suspicious cases, they share it knowing who is going to see it and knowing that they can take action for those domains. So this data platform has, since we started the community, this is why the community is so important. It's grown amazing. It moved from 3 million shared domains to 21 million that we hit the beginning of this week. Yeah, so 21 million unique domains have been shared over the platform. They correspond to about 40 million submissions, which means that every domain is on average shared at least twice, because it's a living platform. It's not something that you don't have absolute truths there. It's a place to share and to discuss. Yeah, okay, this is, but the volume is getting higher and higher, and we are close to this level of maturity that we wanted to achieve with MANRS. I think in 1 or 2 year time, we will, once we agree on the best practices, and once we turn this data into, we are enriching the data at this moment. We are adding new features to the data. It will be a mature project. Hopefully, something close to MANRS, maybe not that close, but something that has an impact. At this moment, we are working with ICANN. We are working with NetBeacon, the DNS Abuse Institute. We are working with ECO, which is the Internet Association of Germany, well, the biggest in Europe also. And we are trying to work with other big players that are really committed, with .eu, for instance, in Europe, and .org. So we are trying to bring big players and to make this bigger and grow in terms of uptake. But we're also working with smaller partners, and that's also a unique feature from Domain Trust, and from the GCA, the capacity to bring other smaller players. Yeah, like I'm talking about small DLDs that need Domain Trust to fight abuse. Yeah, basically. So it's we are moving in that area. 8 used to be the automated IoT defense ecosystem. Now we renamed it to the actual internet data ecosystem. As I said, it started as an IoT security initiative. It stays like that. It's still an IoT security initiative, but it is also an initiative to understand the volume and the impact of unwanted traffic on a global scale. You see here is the type of partners. We have some policy analysis, some manufacturers, some people working on critical infrastructures, universities, lots of them, because now we are in a very early stage. We are focusing on the investigation and analyzing the data. Yeah, so we are understanding what we have there. So universities play a bigger role there, but we also have national search. Yeah, for instance, the Polish search is very active. Basque is very active in this project. So almost going close to 6 years, 200 sensors distributed globally, and database, a repository that goes close to, is getting close to 6 billion lines of IoT incidents and attacks. Yeah, it's not attacks, not always attacks. It's the hits against the sensors. Yeah, in some cases we have scanning. In some other cases we see that they are trying to put some credentials. In some other cases they succeed. And in some other cases, they push malicious, they push malware, which we identify and tag through the hashes. And in some other cases, they even point at malware distribution systems. And that's where the real value is. Yeah, that's where we're observing how the networks are being used as a distribution channel for all kinds of bad stuff. Yeah, this is the one traffic, you know about that. And this is the newest project, which is open source. We want to, it's just started. Yeah, so it's very fresh. We are trying to see how we can bring open source and existing initiatives for two purposes. First of all, to build the bridges across our different projects, to see how the data in domain trust and MANRS, or the data between MANRS and 8, they relate to each other. And we can find, we have 3 sources of information, and they all relate because they, after all, they address the internet, the integrity of the internet infrastructures, yeah, network operations. So we're trying to see how things play together. Also, with the other programs of the Global South Alliance, how what we're doing relates to the toolkits, for instance, how we can leverage our efforts. There's a very, in the past, we have observed a very close connection between the cybersecurity toolkits and domain trust, for instance. They play very well together. So we're trying to systematize that. And also across the community, yeah, to identify initiatives, efforts, things that are happening that could be useful for our larger mission. As I said, we are a collaborative organization. And, Georgios, it's a low interaction honeypots. It's Kauri. I guess you know Kauri. We also have a technology of our own, which is called Proxipot, which is we are now in the. We've done 2 tests of that technology. It works very well, and now we are trying to turn into the one technology that we use. Yeah, but at this moment we're using Kauri. So I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's a low interaction honeypot, and some people claim that usually, well, that's something we're trying to evaluate. Yeah, if attackers know how to avoid it, they know how to avoid it. We know that for sure, but still, it collects a lot of information on unwanted traffic, the things that are just there because you're just connected to the internet. Yeah, this is the value. This is why it's been so useful. I will share, once I finish, I will share a link of the first research project, and you see the value of this low interaction network of sensors. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And what is the frequency of collecting data?
It's open. It's been open since September or August 2018. So we have billions of data. We had different settings. The first setting, which we call Honey Farm 1, it was I think 1,200 sensors, but then we reduced the number of sensors because they were producing a lot of noise. We reduced them to 200, and we increased the geographical distribution of them. And we saw that geography is very important. So we have sensors, I think it's in 90 countries, 90 different countries. And it really changes the picture if you analyze the data from, for instance, we have a partner in Spain, and they are seeing that the data, the hits we're getting in Spain are different than the hits they're getting in other parts of the world. Yeah, so it's really interesting. I will share the connection to the link to the Max Planck Institute, which was the first one that was ever done here, and you see what more or less we're talking about. And we have 4 more projects coming. Soon they will be published. Yeah, they are working on the papers and on the presentations. Yeah, so it's a very interesting project, and it's open to anybody. We have an open call now for the next cohort. It's going to be open until the end of June. So if you want to submit something, I can share information on what are the requirements. Yeah, we have to limit that to 6. Yeah, thank you. To 6 participants because we don't have the capacity to have 100 of them. But if we could, we would have more people for sure. So open source, I covered that, and I think I'm done. I'm sorry that it's taken so long. I'm the interruptions and everything, but well, this is it. You can contact us. I think you should have received an email from me. I've been telling you about the event and all that. So you can also contact through the standard processes managed. Yeah. So that's all I have to say, and see you on November 13th.
Did you want to
sorry.
elaborate on the event on November 13th a little bit more?
Yeah, well, it's the second. Thank you, Pablo. It's the second community meeting of the year, so it's going to be like this, but it's already scheduled. Same time, same. So we're going to do 2 sessions again. It's 8 a.m. UCT and 8 p.m. UCT. So the idea is the same. It's going to be more or less it, but we'll bring the same structure of this event. Yeah, so that's how we are building it. At the date, if you want to save it already, it's November 13th. It's already blocked.
And it's probably a worthwhile mention just to say that there will be some new steering committee members at that point, because there will be an election the month before.
That's
so
true.
I'll just put that out. All right, thank you very much for that, Alejandro. We're going to move on to the insights into routing security now. And for that, our first speaker is Olaf from the Internet Society. So I hope I get this right, but he's a principal for Internet Technology Policy and Advocacy. And he's going to be talking to us about his interest in DNS, routing security, and what he's been seeing in terms of regulatory and policy updates. And we'll hand over to Olaf.
Good, thank you. I hope you can hear me. Thumbs up will do. Perfect. Well, this is not exactly my work that I will be reporting on, but the work of John Morris and Ryan Polk at the Internet Society. The policy work that we've been engaged in most recently has mainly to do with developments on the US policy front. And then more specifically, the changes in the network neutrality setups in the US. There has been an ongoing debate over a very long time in the US, and I'm not a specialist on it, but it's been going back and forth there in all kinds of shapes and ways. And the most recent development there is that the FCC has basically said, we are going to put broadband internet access service providers or services under Title II of the Telecommunication Act. What does that mean? Basically, that the FCC can regulate internet access providers. That happened on the 25th of April through a paper that is called the Declaratory Ruling and Order in the Open Internet Proceeding. And that establishes, as I said, a network neutrality regime. That document is a set of arguments on why the FCC feels that Title II applies and that they basically can do what they want to do, and a number of ideas on how they want to proceed. 435 pages in all its beauty. Within that document, there is one paragraph 47, that implies that the FCC has intentions to regulate routing security. In essence, paragraph 47 refers to, basically says 3 things. When Title II applies to so-called BIAS, broadband internet access services, then the FCC can require service provider to deploy solutions to address BGP vulnerabilities, and it can set cybersecurity requirements on BGP itself. So the context of that paragraph 43 is in a little chapter on cybersecurity. In that same paragraph, they also mentioned that they could seek to address security threats in the DNS. When we read that, we felt we had to respond. We being the Internet Society and the Global Cyber Alliance. So we did a so-called ex-parte comment. Basically uninvited advice to the FCC, and we made a number of arguments why we felt that regulation by the FCC would be a bad idea. That happened on the 17th of April. I will post a link in the chat for that response. There you go. So you can read along if you should want to. But the argument that we made was that basically, if you look at the US, a lot of progress has been made on routing security. If you go to the counts of valid ROAS, then that has increased significantly over the last 4 years, from December 2019 till December 2023. That went from 8% to 35%, which is a 350% increase, and that's always a nice number. And we made the point that within the US, using, of course, the data from the MANRS Observatory and from our polls data, 50% of the traffic in the United States passed through valid ROAS. And the reason why we made that point is that we fear that when the FCC creates regulations, most people will go and sit on their hands and wait what the FCC will pose and will provide as sort of the regulatory guidelines, and basically stop moving forward. Point is, industry is doing well. They're really doing this. Second argument we made is that in introducing regulators might not be a big problem for incumbents and big players, but it might be an issue for the smaller providers. Stop nodes that provide rural access, for instance, in alternative ways like community networks, those type of things. Third argument that we made was that there will be internet fragmentation risks, and those have mainly to do with the cross-border nature of this regulation. What if a service provider has a leg in say the EU and in the US, and there is regulation in both places? Will those diverge in time? How do you comply to both compliance regimes? That introduces fragmentary issue. And the fourth argument we made in that paper was that imposing of DNS regulation would be problematic. As I said, that paragraph 46 had some language on the ideas on DNS regulation. And the argument that we made there was basically related to the IANA transition, where the US stepped out of regulating the DNS space, and we basically said, if you do this, you're stepping into that space again, and that will be internationally frowned upon. So that was 17th of April. Last week, my colleagues Ryan Polk and John Morris and Leslie Daigle of the Cyber Alliance met with senior staff persons of the FCC chairwoman, to discuss this. And what they learned in that meeting is that the ideas around this regulation are basically a reporting duty. So a reporting duty on how many ROAs you signed and those type of things, rather than a duty to deploy certain measures. We think that is that is not as damaging as it could be, but we only know this when things appear on paper. Now, decisions around this will be made in a meeting of the FCC, an in-person meeting of the FCC in June. And because that meeting is in June, we expect, in fact, tomorrow a paper in which all these plans are more solidified. What are the measures? So we will be on the lookout for that paper, and we'll give feedback if this is going to be heavy-handed. That doesn't necessarily need to happen before the June meeting. The June meeting is basically setting the agenda, and once the agenda is set, the concrete measures will be basically developed. But there is an expectation that there will be drafting language within that document that appears tomorrow. So hot off the press, so to speak. And that document that appears tomorrow is called the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking. So that is the hot off the press developments with regards to the FCC. Within the US, the Internet Society, and this is really where our focus is in the US if it comes to policy engagement. We are continuing to engage with other governance agencies and entities around improving routing security. There's a roadmap being developed with the Office of the National Cyber Director. So that's part of the executive branch. It's under the White House at improving the routing security ecosystem. And that is primarily looking at improving the US government's ability to lead by example. When you look at that submission that we did to the FCC, you will also see the comparison of the private sector with respect to routing security measures and the federal sector with respect to routing security measures. And the statistics there are, I would say, troublesome. And we're also talking to other agencies such as NIST, I believe. I think concluding this, I could say that there is a lot of activity in the US, and as I said, my colleagues Ryan and John are deeply engaging and collaborating with the Global Cyber Alliance on interventions, positive but also negative interventions. And with that, I hope that I gave you a nice overview. I hope I can answer your questions. And if I cannot, then you have the opportunity to go to the West meeting in which Ryan will give a similar update and is a little bit more on top of this dossier. Oh, yes. Yeah. The title of the thing tomorrow, Georges, is the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking. And the declaration ruling order of the Open Internet proceeding that was published on the 25th. There is a link in the chat right now. I consciously took a little bit longer sentence there to be able to copy and paste.
And Jean-Michael, just clarifying, is it the link that's just been provided that you're after, or are you after something else, just so that we can make sure we send the right link to the mailing list.
Sorry, what is your question?
Jean-Michael put a question just before Georgios's, just asking, is it possible to do an announcement with the link to the paper on the MANRS community list when this will be published? I just want to double check if that is the document that he's referring to, so that we can link
No,
to it.
no. So I think that the document that he is referring to is that announcement that will happen tomorrow, of which we of course have no link yet.
This is
No
correct,
worries. We'll make sure that gets sent out to the list.
because I think this could interest many operators.
Yes.
Yeah. I will pass this on to my colleagues.
Okay, thank you.
All right. If there's no more questions for Olaf at this point, then I will hand over to Jeff Houston, who I would say, with all honesty, needs no introductions. Everybody should know who he is. And Jeff's going to give us his version on trends and incidents and bits and pieces, and I'll hand over to Jeff.
Look, thanks very much for that. Can everyone hear me? Thumbs up.
Yes,
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to talk about what I know as distinct from what I'm guessing about. And one of the issues about routing incidents is that they're shrouded in a huge amount of mythology. Was it a fat finger syndrome? Was it deliberate? Was it panicking? What happened and why are actually really, really difficult questions. And getting to the truth of it is often extremely elusive. And so we hand around some of the more notable incidents, you know, the now venerable and 13-year-old YouTube attack, the Route 53 My Ether wallet attack of more recent times, etc. And we suspect that in some cases the motives are malign, but quite frankly, it's often hard to tell what actually happened. And so it's easier, and I'm going to take the easy path here, I readily admit it. It's easier to talk about what we can see and what we can measure. And what I'm going to talk about here is actually measurements. The way I do this is I take two very, very large collections of BGP perspectives. There is a team at the University of Oregon called the Route Views Project, which has enjoyed funding support from the National Science Foundation for many, many years. Its data goes back to around 93, 94. And these days they have around, I think it's up to 600 BGP feeds directed at them. And they record everything, literally everything. And at the same time, a similar project, it hasn't been underway as long, but it is also quite some time, is undertaken by the RIPE NCC in Europe. And they have, again, I think around 400, 450 routing peers. And so what I do is I take this massive collection of routes and I take the current, or at the time, the published collection of routing security credentials, all those ROAs and the associated certificates that were extant, that were published at the same time as the routing snapshot was taken, and put the two together. This graph, excuse me, is a time series of the proportion of IPv4 routes that have an associated ROA. And the slide starts at around mid-2019 and goes up to, you know, a few days before today, or maybe it even was yesterday. And if you just count the number of route objects, don't care if it's a /8 or a /24, don't care how much traffic it has, if it's in the routing system and it's announced, it's a route object. And what it shows is just a shade under 50% of all those route objects have an associated RPKI routing origination attestation. Now, that's a very impressive achievement. It's gone from 10% in the early days of 2019 to just a shade under 50% across that 5-year period. And it's been steady, consistent, and up and to the right. Now, that's V4. This is V6. Oddly enough, although the number of V6 route objects is smaller, V4 has about, using that scale, around 1.2 million route objects visible in the collection of route views and RipeStat. The V6 collection is around 2 million objects, so it's considerably smaller. But interestingly, that did pass over the 50% mark in March of this year, and is currently running around 52, 53%. So again, in V6, the publication of route objects has been steady and consistent. But this is the map that I find the most curious, because we can geolocate every single route object. And here I've geolocated every single route object to our country. So some routes in Australia, New Zealand, etc., as you see. So what I've then done is coloured the country by the proportion of route objects that have a valid ROA. And it's a curious map. Europe, with the exception of Spain and some elements of Eastern Europe, but Europe has done an amazingly good job if you don't take into account Italy and some of the Balkans. Germany, France, Austria, Czechia, Greece, and then moving across into the Middle East, Turkey, Saudi, Iraq, Iran, Pakistan, India, Bhutan, moving across into Asia, Myanmar, Vietnam, Cambodia, and then down through the Indonesian archipelago, Indonesia, the Philippines. Astonishingly, and Mongolia. There's an amazing amount of work that's been done here in actually putting up ROAs. In South America, everyone except Brazil. In America, where you're just talking about the FCC and trying to regulate this, not so much. Not so much. Certainly compared to the Middle East, definitely not so much. And Africa, that's an odd map of Africa. I think that's the Sudan, certainly Libya. A lot of ROAs. Elsewhere, particularly in Western Africa, not at all. And so it's sort of an odd collection. And you look also at Australia, which, again, in terms of route object counts, not a terribly impressive job. So although you might say, well, you know, there we go, V4, up to half, yay, let's all pat ourselves on the back. The answer really is, well, yes and no. In some places, almost everywhere all at once, and in other places, nothing, just nothing. So the message about creating these credentials and putting them into the routing system is not uniformly appreciated out there. It's sort of spotty in some ways. So similar with V6? No. Why? Because percentages are so weird. There is very, very, very little V6 in the African continent. Very little. And the ones that are doing it have very few routes, and most of them are signed with ROAs. Yay! But it's not a lot of ROAs. It's not a lot of V6 because Africa hasn't done V6. Interestingly, in America, more ROAs in V6 than V4. Across Europe, the V6 story, including Italy, is really quite good. But the issue is, and Spain and Italy are good examples, the amount of V6 there is relatively small, the number of V6 objects is relatively small, but the ones that are doing it are doing a good job. So, the V6 story is kind of subtly different to the V4 one. And I think it reflects the fact that the V6 deployment in a lot of these countries is significantly lesser than the V4 deployment. So a spotty kind of picture. So where are we on the whole? Look, that's more rowers, if you talk about route objects, than we have with V6 deployment. That's a lot. It's a surprisingly good place. And if you sort of take the slice of the world that swings from Europe through the Middle East, Asia, and South America, you actually find that there's been quite extensive deployment. It's just North America and Africa and Australia and Oceania. The answer is, well, not so much. The other aspect of this, and I haven't actually produced figures here, is that the publication system appears to be adequately robust. In other words, if you want to get a local copy of all of these produced objects and maintain that local cache, as you need to do if you're doing any form of route origination validation, then you can maintain a local cache that is well enough up to sync with the publication state most of the time. We've had very few major outages, and the system appears to be scaling. Now, the reason why is that almost everyone who publishes these credentials relies on the publication services provided by the RIRs. They do not publish their own. Were they to do so, and you had up to 20,000 separate publication points, I suspect the whole picture of resilience and performance would be different and probably far worse. But that high degree of centrality in publication of these objects has its own issues with vulnerability of centrality. But at the same time, that gives it a huge amount of resilience and operational robustness, because you can pick up most of the objects by querying 5 publication points. And that's certainly been to RPKI's advantage. So the royal publication story is mixed, predominantly good, but publishing rowers is only the first step, because what you need to do is to then figure out how to use that origination of the authority. And here's an entirely different picture about the number of users as a percentage of the total user population who sit behind networks that perform route origination security to the extent that if an object, if a destination has an invalid route, you shouldn't be able to get there. If you can't get there, then everything's doing its right job. Now, if everyone was doing this, it wouldn't be 20 to 25%, it'd be 100%. If the object is invalid, you can't get there no matter where you are. But this says around about 1/5 of the world can't get there, and the rest of the world will still go there, even though the route is invalid. How do I know this? Well, this is one of these classic many-to-one sampling exercises. I use online advertisements. But firstly, I suppose, let me just talk about what invalid destinations are. I use Cloudflare to make invalid destinations. I do not use my own. Why? Because as soon as my transit networks do invalid route dropping, no one can get to my invalid destinations, irrespective of their local state. And so using a small number of targets does not work in this kind of a measurement. So that's why I've gone to a CDN with a few thousand points of presence, Cloudflare, and gone to a network where the average AS path length, Cloudflare, is around 1.1. So the effects of transit networks doing invalid route dropping has been minimized, and I get a much closer view of the behavior of stub networks. That's the first trick. The second one is I use online advertising. So I enroll around 10 million endpoints a day to say, can you get to this destination? Now, the beauty about ads is every day is different. Everyone who sees the ad is different. I'm doing a massive sampling technique of the entire internet every day. And so by the law of large numbers, and that's a pretty large number of sample points every day, you tend to get a pretty complete picture very, very quickly. And so this measurement is a proportion of endpoints who can't reach an invalid destination. And the answer is at 20% today, it's looking better than it has been in the past, but it's not very good. And other days and other measurements have been a bit higher. It's certainly not ubiquitous deployment. Where are the networks that perform dropping? Now, this is not the networks that publish credentials, ROAs. This is the networks that filter it if it fails the test, if the route object is bad. And this is a different map. Don't forget, this is the V4 map of where ROAs are. Look at Saudi Arabia, coloured green. Iraq, Iran, coloured green. America, not coloured green. Look at who's dropping. Saudi Arabia has deployed all the ROAs in the world. 90% of their routes are covered with ROAs. They perform no invalid route dropping. None. You can still get there. Why? Look at Sweden or Finland. Green. Where's the next map? But Sweden's ROA population, no, not so good. But their route dropping, ROVO, route origination validation, really good. Similarly, Australia has a much better record in route origination validation than it has actually publishing ROAs. So this is a different map. And it's not Europe, Middle East, Asia, and bits of South America. POCU actually performing the hard work, dropping invalid routes in terms of user population, France, the US, the Netherlands, Denmark, Finland, Sweden, and possibly Australia, depending on how green you want to make that. Let's take, another picture of this, Saudi Arabia, which I talked about. ROAs, 95% of all routing objects in V4 that originate in Saudi Arabia are covered with a ROA. However, around 97 to 98% of all users in Saudi Arabia can get to destinations where the route origination state says, no, this is not a good route. This is the wrong AS in this particular case. You shouldn't be able to get there if you're doing the work. So they've published the credentials, but they're not doing any filtering. And Saudi Arabia is just one example. As you see from comparing those two maps, there is a lot of those kinds of discrepancies. So publishing ROAs is not the answer. You need to publish the ROAs to find out what's valid and invalid, but then you need to drop destinations that you think are invalid. But that's not enough. That's not enough. Because unless you can protect the AS path, then you're not very well protected against a determined attack. Because if I can fake the path, I can create a false route that just has the original origination, but the AS path is entirely bogus and redirect traffic anyway. So what we're looking at in those two sets of numbers, ROAs and RPKI filtering, ROB dropping, is actually only 2/3 of the work. And the other third is yet to happen because validation origination without AS path protection, as I note here, is ineffectual against determined attack because I can just fake the path and pull off the attack anyway. Now, the IETF did do some work in this space, and they produced a protocol called BGPsec, RFC 8205, which has a very, very robust form of AS path protection, but no one deploys it. Nobody. The deployment hasn't gathered momentum, and it's unlikely to ever do so, because it's just too expensive to run. the cost is too high, the preconditions are too forbidding. It just isn't worth it. It introduces vulnerabilities, complexities, and difficulties, as well as additional costs in routing that no internet service provider is willing to pay the price of. And the issue is, I suppose, the question for the FCC, are you willing to regulate and mandatory use of BGPsec when, as a technology, it is undeployable in any cost-effective manner? And the pragmatic answer is, well, no, it's the wrong kind of answer. The IETF for the last 7 years has been working on an alternative, ASPA, which is a funny form of combination of topology and policy protection. It's a weaker form of path protection. But interestingly, even though the draft has been active in the IETF for the last 7 years, there's still no RFC, there's still no operational uptake, and it's really not clear if there's any momentum behind its deployment. So, even that is going nowhere at this particular point in time. So the work in routing security, irrespective of how the US wants to position it in its regulatory stance, is incomplete. It's not ready. The only form of protections that it does are sort of palliative. You see, if the real question is all of this work we've done, 45% of all routes being, protected with a ROA, 20% of all folk being unable to get to a destination if it has invalid routing credentials, is all that helping? Now, that's really, really hard to measure. It's like saying, do seatbelts save lives? And the answer is, well, seatbelts do save lives. I think we all believe that. But then if the question is, how many? And the answer is, well, I don't know. Because you're wearing a seatbelt and you didn't, have a horrendous outcome in a car accident. That's good. But how do you count the absence of a behavior, the absence of an outcome? And so preventative technologies, which are all about preventing things, are always extremely difficult to measure. So is it helping? We think so, but we're not sure how and why and how much. Now, I think the underlying problem is that routing security is easy to say, but a bit like DNS abuse, everyone who says the words has a different view of what it actually means. When you take a really distributed system, and in routing, there are about 85,000 independent networks that participate in routing, and you try and overlay it with credentials and constraints that prevent all forms of aberrant behavior, including inline behavior. I might be a network and I'd also be a bad actor. How do you prevent me from being a bad actor when I'm a card-carrying peer member of this routing clique that operates the global routing domain? How do you stop, if you will, corruption from the inside as much as efforts to corrupt it from the outside? And quite frankly, what are we trying to protect? Are we trying to protect the routing system? Or are we trying to protect the destiny of packets? That when you send a packet to a destination, the forwarding path is what the routing system said it was going to be, and its ultimate destination is the correct one. So it's not really routing security that you're after. You're actually after forwarding security. And quite frankly, we don't understand how to do the more ambitious goal of forwarding security. So there's a lot of work to happen. Now, in the current state, where we have a certain amount of origination protection and not much more, is that useful? Now, I think the answer is yes, even in its partial state. And it won't really protect you against determined attack. But determined attack is, oddly enough, quite rare. What's far more prevalent is fat fingering and accidental issues, the leaking of information, because routing is complex. Folk sometimes just type the wrong things, stuff happens. And oddly enough, that whole RPKI and route origination validation framework actually does prevent that kind of area of inadvertent lapse. Not all of them, but certainly some of them. And in that respect, yeah, it helps. Cost and benefit, I'm not an economist, but there is some benefit going on. It's not a panacea. It doesn't solve the entire issue. I'm not sure we even understand how to solve the larger questions. There's still an awful lot of research that needs to happen. Is it ready for regulation? Oh, you're so brave if you think it is. So brave. It's not. It's still work in progress. But if you're looking at trying to improve routing, yeah, we're doing that. It is getting better. It is helping, but it's not the end point. Publishing rowers and doing route origination validation are steps along a longer path. So those are my thoughts and views about this. Hopefully that leaves enough time for a community conversation here, which I will happily take part in. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Really appreciate an always challenging conversation from you. And it's good because, like, I'll give an example of something that I was thinking about while you were talking, which is one of the things the MANRS Steering Committee has been discussing is the idea of the fact that you look at like the internet routing registries such as RADDB and what data is in there and is it valid, is it not valid? You can populate it with things you shouldn't, and people can do lots of nasty things there. And so one of the questions that's being asked of us as at MANRS is, should we consider changing some of the actions to say you must do your verification for filtering against an authenticatable IRR, such as AppNIC, AARON, LAPNIC, AfriNIC, and so forth, so that at least then it is known in terms of a similar to the ROA situations as a good, valid data set to work off. However, that obviously has implications to the global routing table with historical routes and other bits and pieces. But it's one of the questions that's in the back of people's minds of would that improve things?
Warren, you're so right. I lived a life as an ISP too, and I was running a major ISP in Australia. And we were constantly saying, please route my address. And you sit there and go, well, is it yours? And the answer is, let's use who is. And you think about it, who is just ASCII lies. You're never quite sure, even if you consult the databases, because it's an open ASCII protocol, you're not even sure if someone's hijacking that session and giving you bad answers. And this whole thing about why is the ISP being placed in the uncomfortable position of being the oracle of saying who has what address when they never handed out the addresses in the first place? They don't have a clue. Why should they be making these difficult decisions? And so part of the rationale from the regional internet registry's perspective was to take that database of who did they give those addresses to and back it up with basic public-private key cryptography. And so what it says is, if I can associate a public-private key pair with an allocation, then if you can demonstrate you have that private key, and that key pair is associated with this address, it's your address, no questions asked. The authority is there. Now, if you then use that to sign things, such as in routing, then you can automate this entire process of going, is that really your address? Are you really the authoritative agent? And so the whole idea was to move beyond the routing databases, which, I'm going to be somewhat dismissive and say they too are just ASCII lies, and move to a point where you say, can you prove where you got this address from? Can you really prove it? Can you sign something that says it's you and nobody else, and it's that address and no other? Can we bind the two together? And that was the thought in the RIR fraternity back in the year 2000 that sent us down this path of actually introducing this technology into the registry system. So yeah, it's a common problem.
And I think it's interesting because one of the things that we are hearing is that a lot of peering points are looking at they will not authenticate anything that doesn't come from the 5 RRRs. So the regional internet routing registries, I should say. And so that could have some unexpected consequences for some of our customers and bits and pieces if their routes don't have entries in those systems. So that's why I brought it up from an interesting perspective of both MANRS and general routing, it doesn't address the security per se, but as you say, in the future it might, but it's an interesting conversation point for us at a community level, if that makes sense.
The early days of the internet were fast, loose, incredibly informal, and badly documented. I think we used pencil and paper, and trying to sort of rewrite that history and sort of make things a lot more robust and go back saying, well, you know, keys would help, you know, real databases, real authority would help, verifying who people said they were at the time would help. You know, it has been the work of some decades to try and clean a lot of that early work up. And the work is not complete. There's still an awful lot of early allocations that are no man's land. And what can I say? You know, the work continues.
Fair enough. Well, I'd like to open the community forum up to anybody who'd like to ask a question of any of our speakers today, or just a question in general. Is there any questions that anyone would like to raise? And if so, could you raise your hand? And I see that my fellow steering committee member, Arturo, has raised his hand. So, Arturo?
Yeah, it's not really a question. It's just a comment. Also, Jeff, thank you for the presentation. It has been a long time that we haven't seen each other face to face, but it's really nice to see you around. As Google guilty as guilty for using RRDB, the only reason that we use it is because it's a common API. So basically, we have resources in the 5 RRRs. So each one has like a different API. I think that something that is really working now is that Arin, I think that is doing it, and Lagnic is doing it. So they are transforming the ROAS to an RRR object. So that facilitates that, because then you don't have to do the RRR and the ROA thing. So that facilitates, and I guess in the future, the hosted RPKI has a common API between the FAR RRRs. It will be easier for other networks that, well, Google is kind of a special case because we have a space in the 5 RRRs. Not everyone has it. So we have to do like 5 different deployments for each one of those. And that's the only reason that we are using RRDB for our RRR objects. But I think that we are going to start changing it as soon as other RRRs start using this transformation from RPKI ROA to a route object. So, yeah.
You know, you bring up a really interesting question. And the issue was that early on in the days of the Routing Arbiter project, and I was involved in that peripherally when Merit did it back in 1993, it was a combination of both, this is my address, and here is the policies around its advertisement and its treatment in routing. Now, the work so far about ROAs and this entire issue with RPKI is actually about, this is simply an address and an AS that originates it. Well, what about policy? And the answer is, well, you know, don't know. And for folk who want policy, the answer is, we could go there, but the will and the effort just don't seem to be around to change and move on from the RRDBs of this world. So you have this unsigned assertion in the routing databases, which are vulnerable, which can be abused, but there's no other source of that policy data. Now, who's responsible for routing? And you and I, Arturo, are both graduates of RIRs. And one of the things that the RIRs always said to the world, in language as clear as we could, we are not the routing police. We just do addresses. And the discomforting view is, we're not sure who is responsible for routing. You know, and because no one seems to be responsible for it, it's very hard to initiate these revisiting of projects going, well, let's sign routing policy. Let's make these tools better, more reliable, verifiable. And the answer is, well, that's great. Who's going to orchestrate this? Who's going to pull this together? And the RIRs are kind of sitting there going, if you really want it to be us, I'm not sure we have the money, the people, the wherewithal. But if no one else is putting their hand up, what do we do? And I think that's a really big question. So, you know, in the absence of alternatives, what can we do?
Yeah, and it's getting more interesting because, well, right now we have the ROAS, as you said, for the route origin. That's fine. That's perfectly nice. So are you allowed to announce those ROAS from another ASN? You are a transit ASN. Then we need the ASN. As you said, ASPA, we don't know when it's going to happen. So today we need to still use the ASN. Where is the ASN? It can be in the RRR of the RRR. So that's fine. But how do we discover that ASN? What we're using today? PIRINDB. So that's another actor in the equation. So it's like it's getting more complicated because not all the pieces are in the same time, in the same place.
Right, and no one seems to be trying to organize us all. And I count the RIRs. We're not the organizer. We're one of the folk to be organized, like the peering DBs and like the rest of the routing, databases, etc. So it's still an open set of questions going on here. And if this community of MANRS wants to take a more definitive lead in this space, I would happily, cheer you on and say more power to you, because someone's got to do it. So thank you for the question, Arturo. It's a great question.
Are there other questions that anyone would like to ask? Sorry, Olaf, was that your hand that went up? Oh, no,
Or
sorry.
you having a headache.
Or a facepalm moment. That's the other one. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm just looking to see if anyone else is asking any questions. Okay. Oh, hang on. Michael's just asked one question in the chat. In my humble opinion, one thing missing on the works for RPKI is tools mechanisms for existing web PKIs. Routing industry registries become a point of failure, and tools mechanisms should exist to mitigate such a thing, e.g. resource challenge when creating ROAs monitoring, etc. Thoughts or comments, group?
You see, we assume in the RIR world that your association as a resource holder to the resources described in the RIR's registry is secure, unique, and you haven't handed the key out to anyone else. It's you. And that gives you the ability to create ROAs in your name. And no one else can, because only you have the keys to that part of the registry that describes your resources. Now, the Web PKI and that whole area is entirely different. The Web PKI is a third-party commentary on who has what domain name. Neither the registrar, the registrant, or anyone else issues that certificate. It's a trusted third party. And the whole issue about the Web PKI is those third-party commentaries are corruptible and have been corrupted in the past and will be corrupted in the future, because they didn't issue the domain name. They don't know it's you. They're just guessing that you have control of that domain name. And if you see someone else's DNS by, seizing their name server records or something, you too can get a Web PKI certificate and no one can tell the difference. It's an entirely different mechanism. The construction of the framework for resources, number resources, is actually the folk who allocated you the resource certify you. There's no third-party commentary. It's direct. I give you that address. I'm prepared to issue a certificate against your key pair to say it's you and it's your address. It's just your key pair. And so that fundamental property of the RPKI is different than the web. Because in the Web PKI, the certificate issue says, oh, you appear to have that domain name. I don't know who you are. I don't know how you got it, but I'll issue a certificate to say that it's yours. Now, the entire internet, except the routing system, relies on that awfully fuzzy third-party assertion. Everything relies on it. And it's kind of scary that it does. Should we have used the Web PKI for routing? I think most of us would shudder at such a concept. We weren't prepared to go there then. We're certainly not prepared to go there now. It's the wrong idea.
Yes, but what happens if tomorrow Irene is found? If a hacker took control of Irene server?
Any distributed trust system relies on points of absolute trust. This is not like blockchain where there's some kind of vote. Absolute trust. The certificate issuers in the Web PKI, you are trusting them never to lie, ever. They're not allowed. In the RPKI system, you are trusting the RIRs. You are. It's a point of fact. And you kind of go, well, hypothetically, what if one of the RIRs failed so badly that it got taken over and issued fake certificates? Well, the answer is, yeah, that's really bad. And I can't stop it, and you can't either. When a point of trust fails, the system fails. That is true. And I suppose we're not resiling from that. We're not walking away to go, it'll never happen. These are just private bodies, as we see with Afrinic. They have their problems from time to time. It is a risk, but we've been unable to dream of anything better. You know, in all this work, you know, we've looked hard at trying to use DNSSEC for routing security. We even looked at blockchain, and there are folks still doing that to see if that's any better. And quite frankly, they all have their weak points as much as they might have their areas of strength. The system that we've come up with is a result of some 14 years of exhaustive effort in trying to search through all this space to make sure, I suppose, that the trade-offs and compromises minimize risk. They don't eliminate it, but to our view, they minimize it. If you think there's a better way of doing this and a different set of compromises that comes up at something more robust, you know, we're always willing to listen. I think everyone is, because I think all of us know in the security world, perfection is a long, long way away, somewhere far away in the future. What we're trying to do is do the best job we can with the tools that we have. So, yeah, it's an interesting question, Jean-Michel, but, you know, it's part of what you need to accept if you're going to trust this system, that the RIRs do not lie. In the same way that if you use the Web PKI, the certificate authorities that you use do not lie. And when they do, the answer is, whoops, that's not meant to happen. Don't lie. And if the RIRs stuff it up, the answer is, well, please don't. Just, it's not meant to happen. Do not lie. Thanks.
Any other questions that anyone would like to ask? Alrighty, we have a few minutes left before the session is meant to end, so I just want to ask one final question. And Jeff, I'm sorry, I'm going to point at you as my question poke with a stick here. One thing that's been really interesting is, as you say, is the fact that, you know, the RIRs are the holders of the address space, and they're the ones that say you have been given this. And obviously some people got routes before some of those RIRs existed, but things like the recent historical work that happened with APNIC, where they went, hey, you've got a historical route, we need you to update it, make it valid and current so that we know that that's there, so then you can get a rower created against your allocation and so forth. Are you seeing more of that happening internationally within the other 4 RRIs as well?
God, it's a pointed stick that you got me with. I used to run a registry that handed out addresses in Australia. AUNIC, we called it. And people used to send us faxes, remember that? And sometimes they'd send us email if they were advanced. And we would then send them back an address going, well, you know, thanks, here's an address. Never really kept very good records because the internet was just this experiment thing. And we ended up, you know, handing out most of a /8, I think, in the end, until it all got too much for me. And I was doing this as a volunteer, yada, yada, yada. So I said to APNIC, have it. Take over my records. And APNIC said, for free. And I said, well, look, here's the deal. Keep them as they are, freeze them, put them in ice and just publish them and leave them there. And if someone wants to change it, they need to become a member. They need to start, you know, being part of the community, and then they can do updates just like everyone else. And a whole bunch of folk did nothing. They just sat there and said, well, I've got my address. Why should I bother? And then along comes things like rowers, along comes better security. They go, we want that. And the answer is, well, who are you and who gave you that address? And the answer is, oh, I think I sent Jeff a fax. And I'm going, I have no memory. I didn't keep the faxes. I have no idea. And so, you know, APNIC had to go through quite a convoluted process and quite a lot of effort to sort of track back through, you know, my past sins and mistakes. Ripe, similar problem. Aaron, huge problem. I think the only folk that escaped most of it was actually LACNIC, which didn't quite have the same kind of legacy issues. But, you know, we've all had to do the best we can in trying to sort out that history. The good news is, of course, that most of the addresses were allocated afterwards. Once the RIRs were established, most of the expansion of the internet occurred. So most of the stuff is in decent order. But, you know, yes, it has been a difficult and expensive problem. And yes, we're not quite out of the woods, but we're certainly trying to clean this up. Why? Because if you can lie in addresses, the internet is stuffed. Yeah, there's just nothing left. And so you need a registry system like you need oxygen if you want the internet to work. You really need these records to work properly, and they need to be right. And that's the RIR's job. That's what we are. Diligent bookkeepers.
No, and I think the reason why I raise it to this group as a community discussion is just to say this highlights the fact that we're going to go through a period of time where we're going to have records that are going to be almost kind of like bogons, where we're not sure who actually owns them, but they're seen somewhat on the internet that probably shouldn't be. And this then leads to other questions that I know that the registries are looking at as well in terms of defining bogons. Every registry has its own unique little way of defining a bogon to a degree, which makes it an interesting challenge when you say, how do we actually implement bogon filtering for everybody? What does it look like, and those sorts of things. So that's why I just wanted to
I'd like to leave you with this. I'd like to leave you with this very glib thought, and I know it's glib and it's the wrong answer. V6 has no bogons. V6 has no history. It has no legacy. If you stop this V4 rubbish and everyone started running V6, we actually have a really clean system. So, you know, what are we waiting for? Like I said, glib but wrong.
But valid. I think very valid. But that's the reason why these conversations are quite interesting and good to have. So unless there is another question, I think we will wrap up here. And for those that will be joining tomorrow for the West session in about 10 hours, thank you very much. And for those that have spoken today, I just want to call out so far to Alejandro, to Andre, to Olaf, and to Jeff. Thank you so much for your conversations today and your presentations. It's been really useful. And as glib as they may be, the conversation has been a good conversation. And I look forward to catching up with most of you face-to-face at the next few events. But until tomorrow, have a great day, night, morning, depending on where you are in the world. And thank you once again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.